About 15 years ago, maybe a little longer, I was in my early 20s, and I was living the typical I am going to be famous someday life. I was never a good student in school, and to be completely honest, I was always the class clown. One thing that I always did really well as a kid was make my friends laugh. It was my superpower. Instead of going to college like my parents wanted, or getting a normal stable job right after high school, I decided that I was going to become a professional stand-up comedian. Spoiler alert, I did not become a famous comedian, which when you think about it, is probably the best joke of my entire stand-up career. Instead, what I actually got was nearly a decade of bombing on stage in front of dead silent crowds. And even worse than that, during this period, the most terrifying single-handed experience of my entire life happened to me. For a little bit of context, doing stand-up is incredibly hard, and it is definitely not lucrative when you are not successful. Not to mention, back then, stand-up comedy was not nearly as popular or accessible as it is today. There were no viral social media clips or massive streaming specials for beginners. To say it is a grind is a massive understatement. You question your life decisions every single time you perform, especially when you tell a joke and all you hear is the clinking of glasses and the sound of crickets. But then you get that one crowd. You get that one room that laughs at one of your jokes, and the high you experience from the crowd laughing and cheering is completely intoxicating. It is like a drug, and I assume that is why struggling comedians constantly keep grinding, day after day, year after year. Part of the daily grind is finding any gig that will pay you, or even just let you perform for a couple of minutes for free. I was fortunate enough to have several open mics in my hometown, but you are not getting paid a single dime at an open mic, and a lot of the time, you are sharing the stage with all sorts of other talented people, and not just comedians. There would be musicians, magicians, and spoken word poets. Let me tell you, nothing kills a comedian's momentum like performing right after someone who just poured out their soul with life-altering tragic poetry. The room is completely silent and emotional, and then you have to walk up and try to make them laugh about your dating life. It is brutal. After a few years of performing at these local open mics, I decided I needed to expand my horizons. I started trying to reach out to club promoters and local comedians who would get booked for actual paid shows. Most of the time, these shows would be several hours away if I were lucky. Usually, they were even further than that. I managed to book a few shows, and this is where the grind gets extremely real. It is also where my story takes a very dark and terrifying turn. I did not have very good luck with these traveling shows. I was barely getting paid anything, sometimes just gas money, and I was driving 4 or 5 hours across state lines just for 5 minutes of stage exposure. It was definitely not an ideal situation for someone who was completely broke and barely had any income coming in to begin with. But one night, I thought my big break had finally arrived. I had an amazing opportunity to perform at a show that was being held 5 hours away from where I lived. This show was actually a competition for up-and-coming comedians trying to break into the mainstream. The first place prize was $1,000 cash, which felt like $1 million to me at the time. But the real prize, the thing that made me pack my bags instantly, was that several moderately famous comedians were going to be the judges of the show. It was my golden opportunity to show actual industry professionals that I had real talent. The worst part for me when I would make all these long trips was my equipment, or lack thereof. I had a total garbage car, an old beat-up sedan that rattled whenever I went over 40 miles per hour. On top of that, I had an old cell phone that was about as reliable as those big 1980s brick cell phones. I would always think to myself on these long drives that if something bad happened to my car, or if I got stranded, I would be completely on my own. My drives almost always consisted of nothing but endless farmland and open fields as far as the eye could see. There were no gas stations for miles, no rest stops, and very little traffic because I was a lazy person. I did not bother to double-check my printed-out MapQuest directions before I left my house. MapQuest was what we used back then, and if you missed a turn, you were essentially doomed because the paper could not recalculate for you. Instead of preparing, I decided to just wing it, a decision that I still regret deeply to this day. And as you can probably guess, I got completely lost. The physical directions I had in my hand did not match where I was at all. I had been driving on a very narrow, dusty backcountry road for some time, and I had absolutely no idea if I was even heading in the general direction of the venue. Thankfully, I always left for these traveling jobs several hours early, just in case I got lost. I may have been lazy with my planning, but I knew myself well enough to know that getting lost was not uncommon for me. It was still daylight when I started driving through a small town. Honestly, calling it a town might be a major stretch. There were just a few beat-up old wooden buildings and small, run-down houses on a street that was maybe a couple of 100 feet in length. It looked like a place that time had completely forgotten. Outside of an old rusted gas station, there were a few individuals standing around. They looked less than welcoming. I know that is kind of rude to say, but they looked dirty, mean, and aggressive. They did not look like they were under the influence of anything. They just looked like they had been beaten up by life and did not want any outsiders around. I pulled my car up to the pump, got out, and decided to ask them where I was. I tried asking them if I was on the right track to get to the highway. They were extremely short with me. They didn't really answer my questions at first, just grunting or giving me one-word answers. After an awkward and tense back-and-forth exchange, one of them finally spat on the ground and told me where I needed to go. According to this rude townsman, I was still somewhat on the right track. Somehow I had missed a major turn a while back, but he told me that if I stayed straight on this specific road for a while, eventually I would see the highway road I needed to be on. I thanked them as politely as I could, even though they were being incredibly hostile. I started filling up my gas tank before setting off again. While I was standing there pumping the gas, I noticed that several of the people I had just talked to were staring directly at me. It was an incredibly uncomfortable feeling. It was those dead-eyed, empty stares, and it was not just one of them doing it. I counted at least 4 of them, just standing completely still like statues, watching my every move. They did not blink. They did not talk to each other. They just watched me. It made me feel all sorts of weird and my stomach started to knot up. I finished pumping the gas as quickly as possible, paid, got into my car, and drove out of that small town as fast as my crappy sedan would allow. Once I was back on the open road, I tried to shake off the weird feeling. I started driving and rehearsing my comedy routine to myself out loud. I kept thinking about how ironically funny my conversation with the townspeople actually was, and I even tried thinking of ways that I could incorporate this bizarre experience into my stand-up routine for the show. I figured if I could make light of it, it would help me calm down. Not long after leaving the town, a beat-up white pickup truck flew past me going incredibly fast. It kicked up a massive cloud of dust and gravel, almost hitting my front bumper as it cut back into my lane. I muttered an insult to myself, but did not think too much of it at the time. I figured it was just another crazy local driver who was familiar with the roads. By the time it was around dusk, I had been driving for nearly an hour since I left that weird little town. The landscape had changed. There was now nothing but dense, thick trees on both the left and right sides of the road. It felt like the forest was closing in on me. I had that undeniable gut feeling that I was probably lost again. There were no signs, no landmarks, just endless trees. As I continued driving down the road, hoping for a sign of civilization, I suddenly heard a loud, violent metal sound from underneath my car. Almost instantly, the steering wheel started shaking violently in my hands, and I started losing control of the vehicle. I slammed on the brakes and steered into the dirt shoulder. I knew right away what had happened. It was unmistakable. I had somehow gotten a flat tire. I got out of the car to inspect the damage, and when I saw the wheels, I could not believe my eyes. It was not just a single flat tire. Both of my front tires were completely obliterated, shredded to pieces. When I leaned over to take a closer look at the rubber, I noticed that the tires were impaled with several thick, rusty construction nails. They were embedded deep into the tread. There was no way this was an accident. I quickly pulled out my terrible cell phone, and of course, the signal bars were completely empty. The service was non-existent. I tried calling a tow truck anyway, hoping a call might go through, but nothing worked. Even if it did work, I had no idea where I was, or even what road I was currently on. I hung up the phone in frustration. Instead of panicking like a normal person, I was actually starting to get angry. I was angry because I realized I was going to miss the comedy show. I was stupid, and my priorities were completely in the wrong place. I decided to try and call one of my friends, hoping that a text or a brief call might slip through the weak service. I managed to get a very static-filled connection to a friend back home. I quickly described everything that I remembered about the drive, and I told him about the weird small town with the gas station. He told me he was going to try to look up the area on his computer, and that he would call me right back if he found anything. After we hung up, I stood there in the quiet forest. I did not know if I should just stay put in the car, or if I should try walking back in the direction of the town. I decided that staying put in the car was the safest option, because now that it was almost completely dark, the temperature was dropping rapidly, and it was starting to get very cold. It was abundantly clear to me now that I was not going to make the comedy show. My big break was gone. While I was sitting in the driver's seat, waiting to hear back from my friend, I suddenly noticed two bright headlights popping out from the horizon far behind me. The headlights stopped moving a good distance away from my car. They did not continue driving in my direction. They just parked there. The vehicle was close enough that the headlights were extremely bright and annoying in my mirrors, but far enough away that I could not make out the make or model of the car. At first, I wondered if it was a police officer, or maybe some local resident who had seen my disabled car and called the authorities to report a vehicle on the side of the road. If you are wondering why I did not just call the police myself earlier, it is because I was driving a car that was not inspected and did not have proper insurance at the time. I was young and dumb, and I was terrified of getting a massive ticket in another state. Several minutes went by, and the mysterious car behind me never moved. It just stayed parked a good distance behind me, shining those blinding bright lights directly into my cabin. After probably a good 5 minutes of this silent standoff, the bright lights suddenly started to get a little closer. The vehicle was slowly, deliberately creeping towards the back of my car. As that was happening, I looked out my front windshield, and my heart leaped into my throat. Two more headlights suddenly appeared in front of me, coming from the opposite direction. They were making their way toward me incredibly fast. This new vehicle drove right up to the front of my car and stopped inches from my bumper, blocking me in completely. At the same time, the car that was behind me pulled up and parked directly against my rear bumper. I was completely trapped. While I was trying to adjust my eyes to the bright light reflecting in my rearview mirror, I noticed that the doors of the vehicle in front of me were now opening. In the glare of the headlights, I could finally see what it was. It was a white pickup truck, the exact same beat-up white pickup truck that had flown past me earlier. Before I could even process what was happening or see anyone approaching, I heard a loud, violent bang on my driver's side window. The glass rattled in its frame. I looked up and I could not believe my eyes. It was the rude, angry man from the gas station. My body went into immediate panic mode. The man began aggressively pulling on my car door handle. Thank God, the door was locked, but he was pulling so hard I thought the handle was going to snap off. When the door did not open, he started to beat his fists violently against the glass window. I shrank back toward the passenger seat, staring in horror. I was not sure how long my cheap window would last before it shattered into a million pieces. As this was going on, I glanced over and noticed one of the other men from the gas station making his way to the passenger side of my car. He also started aggressively trying to rip open the passenger door, shaking the entire car. I was screaming at them through the glass, yelling at them to stop and asking them what they wanted. But it was like they did not even hear me, or they did not care. They did not answer. They were just making strange grunting noises and smashing their hands against the metal and glass. Suddenly, the guy at my driver's side door stopped trying to break the glass. He just stood there, completely still, staring directly at me through the window. It was that exact same vacant, dead-eyed stare from the gas station earlier, but now it was only inches from my face. I can't even begin to explain how truly horrible and unnatural that moment felt. Then, with absolutely no warning or provocation, the man opened his mouth and just started screaming. And it was not a normal, angry scream. He was howling and screaming at the absolute top of his lungs, a high-pitched, animalistic sound that echoed through the forest. I don't know what came over me at that exact second, but the pure adrenaline took over. I decided that my absolute best course of action was to get out of the car and run. Staying in that metal box felt like waiting to be trapped in a coffin. I unlocked the door, gathered all my strength, and pushed the driver's side door open as hard as I possibly could. Thankfully, the heavy door slammed directly into the screaming man, throwing him off balance and knocking him flat onto the dirt road. I did not hesitate. I jumped out of the car and ran as fast as my legs could carry me straight into the dark woods. But instead of running blindly deeper into the pitch-black forest, where I could easily get lost or trip and break my leg, I made a split-second decision. After running only about 10 or 15 feet into the thick brush, I dove flat onto the ground behind a large fallen log. I pressed myself into the dirt and leaves, holding my breath. I hoped and prayed that these guys would assume I had run much deeper into the woods and would chase me in that direction, and thankfully, that is exactly what happened. Moments later, I heard the heavy crashing footsteps of several people sprinting right past my hiding spot, tearing through the branches and yelling to each other. When the sounds of their footsteps faded into the distance and I was sure they were gone, I quietly got up from the dirt. I did not look back. I ran back toward the road in my car. To my surprise, the men had left the car doors open, and my backpack and cell phone were still sitting on the front seat. They had not touched them. I grabbed them, stayed low to the ground to keep out of the headlights, and just ran as fast as I could down the road in the opposite direction. The entire time I was running down that dark road, my heart was hammering against my ribs. I constantly expected them to jump out of the woods in front of me, but I never saw them again. About half an hour later, dripping with sweat and covered in dirt, I was able to flag down a passing car. The driver was a lone woman, and she was uncharacteristically kind. Honestly, looking back, I don't know if I would have been so nice and trusting of a disheveled, screaming man waving his arms in the middle of nowhere in the dead of night. But she stopped. She immediately called the authorities for me, and even let me sit in the safety of her warm car until the police showed up. I told the responding officers absolutely everything that had happened, from the gas station to the nails, in the road to the screaming men. But as you might expect, there really was not much they could do. When they went back to my car, they found it abandoned. There was no physical evidence of anything malicious other than some small dents in the car door panels. Given the overall terrible condition of my car, the cops openly admitted they did not believe the dents were fresh or caused by attackers. They thought I was just a paranoid kid who got a flat tire and panicked. To make matters worse, I also received a couple of expensive tickets from the officers because my car was unregistered and uninsured. It was the absolute perfect icing on the cake for this nightmare of a story. I never found out why those people targeted me, how they got the nails on the road so fast, or what they wanted to do to me. Clearly they were not trying to help. All things considered, I am just incredibly lucky that I am here today to tell this story. All I can say is, please be careful out there on those lonely back roads. You never know what people are capable of, especially when there is nobody around to witness it. Now, let me tell you about another incident that happened to my two close friends and me last summer. I feel like I am still not completely right from what happened to us. What was supposed to be an awesome, bonding girls road trip turned into a living nightmare that I am not sure I will ever fully get over. For a little bit of context about myself, I am not a spontaneous person in any way, shape, or form. I am one of those highly anxious people who has to have every single thing planned out very far in advance. And even then, every tiny little detail needs to be accounted for, documented, and checked twice. It is admittedly very annoying for some of my friends, but it is just how my brain operates. I need control. In late June of last year, I broke up with my boyfriend of 5 years. It was an incredibly messy, painful breakup that left me feeling completely drained and lost. One of the only things that got me through those first few weeks was that my close friend Sarah had also just dumped her long-term boyfriend. Having someone to spend time with who was going through the exact same emotional situation was such a blessing. Strangely, Our mutual bonding through misery and grief helped both of us start to heal and move on. A few weeks after the breakups, our other close friend, Alyssa, invited Sarah and me on a cross-country road trip she was planning. Ordinarily, my answer would have been a firm no. The sheer anxiety of a road trip without a strict itinerary would be enough to make me melt away. But for some reason, this time, I felt different. I wanted to escape my life. It sounded like a fun, healing girls' trip where we could just leave our problems behind. All three of us are fortunate enough to have jobs where we can easily take extended time off, so that was not an issue. Alyssa basically lives on the road. She is always traveling, living out of her car, and finding these insane, beautiful hidden places all over the country. She is the type of adventurous woman who will just throw a sleeping bag down in the dirt and sleep under the open stars without a second thought. She has always been a free spirit. Sarah and I, on the other hand, were much more sheltered. So we decided to let Alyssa basically be the captain of our little crew for this trip. She planned the general route, and we were just along for the ride. The first day or two of the trip was a little rough for me personally. I just was not used to winging things, and every time we did not have a set hotel, my anxiety would spike. But after a while, the fresh air and the music got to me, and I started really enjoying myself. On the third day of our drive, we were passing through a very rural area when we drove by this massive, insane-looking old barn. It was definitely abandoned. The wood was gray and weathered, and there was no sign of human life anywhere around. The surrounding farm fields looked like they had been completely overgrown by wild nature for decades. Alyssa immediately slammed on the brakes. She was begging us to go inside and explore it with her. But I was not feeling it at all. Alyssa was adamant that clearly nobody lived there, so it was safe. She was obviously correct about the abandonment, but I just could not bring myself to trespass on private property. It is also worth noting that I am just a huge baby when it comes to scary situations. Not wanting to trespass was my easy excuse, but in reality, I was absolutely terrified of someone squatting inside that dark barn. I had listened to way too many true crime podcasts in my life, and I was not about to get kidnapped or murdered by some insane backwoods farm man. After a few minutes of intense arguing, Alyssa finally gave up, laughed at my paranoia, and we decided to keep moving on with our trip. The next week of traveling was absolutely amazing. We went sightseeing all over the beautiful US countryside. Alyssa showed us hidden waterfalls, mountain overlooks, and things that were truly incredible. We partied in tiny local bars in small towns, slept on a mountainside, and met awesome, friendly people from all different walks of life. It really was an incredible experience that was helping me heal. But there was one little thing that was starting to get slightly annoying. Throughout the entire week of traveling, Alyssa kept bringing up that abandoned barn. It seemed like any time she could work it into the conversation, she did. She was completely obsessed with it. As we were finally driving back towards civilization at the end of our trip, Alyssa realized we were going to pass by the same area. She basically begged Sarah and me to let her just get a closer look at the barn. I don't know if it was the trip that had made me come out of my shell a little bit, or if it was just days of Alyssa slowly breaking down my defenses, but I was starting to warm up to the idea. I told her that if we got there, and it looked like absolutely nobody had been there in years, then we could quickly check it out. I was confident that it was abandoned, but I just wanted to make sure I put that safety boundary out into the universe. I was not even 100% sure that Alyssa could actually find her way back to it. But that girl is amazing with directions. She knew exactly how to get there. We spotted the weathered barn around 4:30 in the afternoon. Alyssa drove our SUV off the main road, onto the overgrown dirt and grass, and parked it several yards away from the barn structure. We did not want to park right next to the doors, just in case my fears were right, and some scary squatter was living inside. Alyssa was like a little kid on Christmas morning. She ran to the massive barn door first. When Sarah and I caught up and walked inside, the atmosphere was crazy. I am pretty sure the thick vines wrapping around the beams were the only things holding the entire wooden building up. It almost sounded like the place was breathing, but I am pretty sure that was just the structural integrity of the old building, slowly creaking and falling apart in the wind. The weirdest part was all of the strange, rusted equipment that was still sitting inside the barn. It did not look like any modern or even historical farm equipment I had ever seen before. But then again, I am not a farmer, so maybe it was just very old specialty stuff. To me, it looked like metal contraptions you would find in a medieval dungeon. It was creepy, but we took a bunch of aesthetic pictures anyway. After we explored the main barn, Alyssa pointed to the old farmhouse that was connected to the back of the barn by a wooden walkway. She wanted us to check that out next. At this point, I was fully invested in the adventure, so she did not get any pushback from me. We walked over to the farmhouse door, but it was warped tightly into the wooden frame. We actually had to kick the door down to get it to open. Inside, the house was both creepy and deeply sad. It was completely empty and abandoned. It was not like the previous owners had left furniture, clothes, or personal items behind. It was entirely barren, except for a small green wooden table and a matching green wooden chair sitting right in the middle of the kitchen. What made me sad was that I could not stop thinking about the families who had most likely lived there before. I mean, it was a working farm at one point. Real people with lives, dreams, and children had to have lived there, and now their home was just rotting away, forgotten by history. We explored the empty rooms, and I imagined how cute the little house must have been at one point. After a while of just hanging out, sitting on the dusty floor, and talking inside the small house, Alyssa and Sarah suddenly made a crazy suggestion. They suggested that instead of driving to a motel, we should just set up our sleeping bags and stay inside the farmhouse that night. Obviously, looking back now, this was a horrible, incredibly stupid idea. But at that exact moment, surrounded by my best friends on a wild road trip, it seemed exciting and adventurous. And at this point in the trip, I was trying to say yes to life. We had been hanging out there so long already that I did not even realize it was almost 7 in the evening. We walked back to the SUV, grabbed our sleeping bags, pillows, and supplies. We ate some cold sub sandwiches from our cooler, drank a few warm beers, and talked about our favorite memories from the trip. Around 9 o'clock, as the darkness fully set in, we started setting up our sleeping bags on the floor of the empty living room. We all set our phone alarms for 6 in the morning so we could pack up and get right back on the road early. We were all completely exhausted from the day, so it did not take us very long to pass out. As I mentioned, I am an incredibly light sleeper. I spent the next few hours tossing and turning on the hard floor, going in and out of light consciousness. I must have finally fallen into a deeper sleep briefly, because around 3 o'clock in the morning, something very strange woke me up. I swear I thought I heard someone make a quiet shush sound right next to my ear. I immediately sat up from my sleeping bag, my heart starting to race. I scanned the dark room the best I could. The only light was the faint moonlight shining through the thick vines on the window frame. I did not see or hear anything out of the ordinary. I looked at Alyssa and Sarah, who both seemed to be sleeping peacefully. My best guess was that either Alyssa or Sarah had just been snoring or making noises in their sleep. I laid back down, pulled the sleeping bag over my shoulders, and shut my eyes. Almost instantly, I jumped back up because there was a massive, incredibly loud bang at the front door. It sounded like someone had literally crashed their entire body weight into the wooden door. And remember, we had to kick the door down earlier, so it was not securely locked. It was basically just propped up loosely against the rotten frame. If this really was a person outside, they could easily just push the door down with minimal effort. The violent bang on the door was so loud that it instantly woke up Alyssa and Sarah. Both of them sat up, completely startled and disoriented. We all sat there frozen on the floor, holding our breaths, listening intently for any other sound. Instead of another loud bang, we suddenly started to hear these soft, delicate, rhythmic taps coming from the window pane on the other side of the room. Tap, tap, tap. And then, the violent banging on the front door started again, shaking the entire wall. This was not the wind. This was not the creaky old barn settling. This was, without a doubt, people. Multiple people who clearly knew we were inside. We all huddled up close together in the center of the room, completely panicking. It is easy for people to say what they would do in a situation like this, how they would fight back or run. But I promise you, in that moment of pure terror, You are completely paralyzed. The violent banging on the door suddenly stopped, and then the propped-up wooden door was slowly, quietly pushed inward. Two skinny men and one skinny woman walked slowly into the room. I would estimate that all of them were maybe in their late 30s. They did not rush in screaming, and they did not do anything wild or aggressive at first. Instead, they just slowly walked in, side by side, and stood directly in front of us, staring down at us. Somehow, the fact that they walked in so calmly and normally like that made it 10 times scarier. Sarah completely lost her composure and started to scream. In response to Sarah's screaming, one of the skinny men suddenly opened his mouth and started screaming back at her. It was bizarre. It was like he was deliberately mirroring her exact screams, mocking her terror. The skinny woman in the group then looked at Sarah and made a loud shushing sound, holding her finger to her lips. The man standing in the middle of the group then started to make strange, exaggerated gestures with his hands, almost like a silent mime. It was completely surreal. I did not even realize until that exact moment that all three of them were holding weird, handmade masks in their hands. As soon as the man was done with his silent hand gestures, all three of them slowly raised the masks and put them on. The masks were so incredibly weird and disturbing. I have never seen anything like them before or since. The man in the middle put on a mask that was literally just a giant, solid purple cube made of cardboard or plastic. There were no eye holes, no nose, no mouth, just a solid purple cube on his head. The other man, the one who had been mimicking Sarah's screams, put on a mask that looked like a homemade Batman mask made of rough, dirty cardboard, and the woman put on what looked like a standard medical mask, but she had attached long plastic holiday icicles to each side of it, hanging down past her chin like terrifying white tusks. They slowly, deliberately started creeping closer to our huddled group on the floor. The more we panicked and cried, the louder and more visibly irritated they became. As we screamed, they began to scream back at us in unison. Suddenly, the woman lunged forward and grabbed me by my shoulders. Because she was incredibly skinny and light, the adrenaline kicked in, and I was able to violently push her away. She fell backward onto the dusty floor. The distraction caused the two masked men to stop and look down at the fallen woman. The guy wearing the purple cube mask looked up at me and shouted in a raspy, angry voice that I was going to pay for doing that. Thankfully, Sarah had a small can of pepper spray attached to her car keychain next to her sleeping bag. She grabbed it and started spraying it wildly in the direction of the three masked people. The burning spray created a temporary barrier and gave us the tiny window of opportunity we needed. We jumped up and ran right past them, coughing from the fumes. As we sprinted toward the exit, the skinny woman on the floor reached out and grabbed my ankle, tripping me. I kicked back as hard as I could, managing to free my leg from her grip. As I scrambled to my feet and ran out the door, I looked back over my shoulder for a split second. I saw the woman standing up, reaching behind her back into her waistband. I ran toward our parked SUV as fast as my legs could possibly go. I did not want to wait around for even a second to find out what weapon she was reaching for in her waistband. We could still hear them screaming and howling from inside the farmhouse as we ran across the dark grass. For some strange reason, they did not chase us out into the field. I remember my vision being blurry and my eyes stinging terribly from the pepper spray particles that had been hanging in the air as we fled the house. Alyssa unlocked the SUV. We all jumped inside, slammed the doors, and Alyssa put the car in drive, tearing out of the field and hitting the main road. We drove away as fast as we possibly could, not stopping once until we were back in our home state. We actually decided not to report the incident to the police, because we figured that we were the ones who had technically trespassed on private property first. And we did not want to get into legal trouble. We tried to convince ourselves that maybe those people were just the eccentric owners of the property. Though in my heart, I seriously doubt that. One of the scariest parts of this entire ordeal, for me at least, is that we have absolutely no idea where those people came from. They just suddenly appeared in the middle of the night. We had explored that entire barn and farmhouse that afternoon, and there was absolutely no sign of human life. No food wrappers, no footsteps, no footprints in the thick dust, no other cars parked nearby, nothing. these deranged, mask-wearing lunatics had just materialized out of the pitch-black night with the sole purpose of terrorizing and harming us. I am still not over the mental scars from that trip. I am happy I got that girl's road trip out of my system, but I am perfectly fine if I never go on another cross-country trip for the rest of my life. I will settle for a nice, safe staycation next time. That brings me to the final story I want to share with you today. A few years ago, my girlfriend and I decided to take a scenic road trip across the United States. This trip was supposed to be the most important and special trip of our lives, because it was the trip where I had planned to propose to her. Unfortunately, that is not the only reason this trip is so memorable to me. One of the happiest memories of my entire life is also permanently plagued by an event that nearly ended both of our lives in the middle of nowhere. This is actually the very first time I am trying to write this story down, instead of just telling it verbally to people. And to be honest, it is probably the first time I have written anything substantial since I was in high school. So, I apologize in advance if this is not the greatest literary work of art you have ever heard. For a little bit of backstory, I owned a large pickup truck with an exceptionally big cargo bed. Before we left, I had set it up perfectly. It was more than big enough for my girlfriend and me to lie down comfortably on a thick air mattress that I had fitted into the bed of the truck. We spent days hiking through beautiful trails across the country, and every night we would park and sleep in designated camping areas right in the back of my truck. I had camped a few times as a kid with my family, and I always absolutely hated the process of setting up tents, dealing with bugs, and sleeping on the cold, hard ground. Sleeping in the elevated comfort of my truck bed felt like a perfect hybrid version of camping, and I was completely here for it. We both absolutely loved the outdoors, but we would also be the very first to admit that we are not the most natural survivalists. We liked our comfort. Almost every single night on the road trip was absolutely beautiful. We were incredibly lucky when it came to the weather. There was no rain, just clear skies. Every single night, we would fall asleep staring up at the vast, starry sky. And let me just tell you, if you have never gazed at the stars in the deep wilderness without any city light pollution, you need to change that right now. It is life-changing. But there was one major downfall to this setup. My girlfriend was the absolute lightest of light sleepers. Literally every single tiny sound woke her up instantly, and because we were sleeping out in open nature, that meant every gentle gust of wind, every distant bird sound, and every rustling tree branch caused her to snap awake in a panic. I would always offer her sleep medicine or earplugs to help her rest, but she would always stubbornly deny them. She claimed that taking sleep aids would make her wake up, feeling groggy in the morning, which was apparently worse to her than being half awake and exhausted all night long. But it was not just being a light sleeper that kept her awake on this trip. She also had a deep, almost crippling fear of bears. Ever since one of her coworkers had told her a horrific story about how her family had been attacked by grizzly bears on a camping trip, my girlfriend had been on absolute high alert. Every single noise she heard outside the truck, she immediately assumed was a giant bear coming to eat us. Now, with that backstory out of the way, I will share what was very nearly the last night on Earth for both my girlfriend and me. About 3/4 of the way through our trip, we reached a beautiful mountain overlook. I got down on one knee, proposed to her, and through tears of joy she said yes. It was easily one of the happiest, most emotional days of my entire life. With the immense stress of the proposal finally out of the way, I slept like an absolute baby that night. I was completely dead to the world. The next morning, however, I woke up to find my new fiancée looking incredibly pale and exhausted. She was more tired than she had been on the entire trip so far. When I asked her if she had just been scared of the nature noises again, she kind of paused. She did not answer me right away, which was very unusual behavior for her. She usually complained about the noises immediately. She then looked at me seriously and told me that she had woken up in the middle of the night because she swore she could hear the distinct sound of someone walking on the dirt right outside the truck. She said she stayed lying completely flat and still on the air mattress so she would not make the truck shake, so she did not actually peer over the edge to see who it was, but she was absolutely convinced that someone was slowly pacing around the perimeter of the truck bed. She told me that every time she tried to close her eyes to go back to sleep, she could hear the faint crunching of gravel, and she was even sure she heard quiet mumbling or whispering at one point. I did believe her. Well, let me rephrase that. I believed that she believed she had heard those things. I was not dismissive of her feelings, but in my mind, I was pretty sure we were not being actively stalked by some creep in the wilderness. I figured it was just her hyperactive imagination combined with her fear of bears. But before we left the campsite that morning, she suddenly let out a loud gasp as she walked around to the driver's side of the truck. When I ran over to see what was wrong, she pointed down at the dirt. There, clearly imprinted in the soft soil right next to the driver's side door, was what looked like a small human footprint. I was probably being ignorant and trying to keep her calm, but I told her it was a stretch to call that a footprint. I asked her if it could have possibly been her own footprint from the day before. She instantly protested, saying she had not walked on that side of the truck at all. I did not argue with her, because I could tell she was genuinely freaked out. I made sure I thoroughly checked the entire truck, looking under the chassis and in the cab to confirm we did not have some secret passenger clinging to the vehicle. During my search, I did find something slightly weird in the back seat of the cab. My travel planner was sitting on the seat, and it was open to the exact page where I had written down the list of specific campsites and coordinates we were planning to stop at each night. But again, I did not think anything of it at the time. I figured my fiancé had just been looking at it the night before to check our route, or it was entirely possible that I had left it open there myself. I put the planner back into my bag, got us both ready, and we hit the road. It took a little while for her to get out of her tired morning fog. But after we stopped and got her a large coffee, she was feeling like herself again and did not bring up the scary events of the previous night for the rest of the day. We spent the next day just being obnoxiously in love, hiking through the beautiful mountain passes and taking photos of her new engagement ring. As night began to approach, we arrived at our final designated campsite of the trip. We set up our little cozy camp nook in the truck bed with the air mattress and blankets. I could tell that as the sun went down, she was starting to get a little more uneasy than she had been any other night. But it was not the fear of bears that was freaking her out tonight. It was the distinct possibility of another human being standing outside the truck in the dark. I felt terrible seeing her so anxious. I told her we could easily sleep inside the locked cab of the truck, or we could even drive to the nearest town and find a hotel room if she wanted to. But she stubbornly insisted that we stay in the truck bed, since it was our very last night in the wilderness, and she did not want to ruin the experience. I decided that I would stay awake on this night to keep watch and make sure she was able to fall asleep safely. It took her a long time to relax, but she finally passed out around midnight. To help keep her mind off the heavy silence of the forest, I had dug out my old portable DVD player from high school and thrown on an old season of Family Guy. The quiet, familiar cartoon sounds seemed to comfort her. The once beautiful silence of nature was now something she was deeply afraid of, even though she would never openly admit it. Once she was sound asleep, I shut the DVD player off, rolled over onto my side, and tried to get some sleep myself. But before I could even fully doze off, my ears picked up a faint sound. It was coming from outside the truck. My very first thought was that it must be a baby bear, because the heavy rustling and dragging sound seemed much larger than a raccoon or a coyote. I knew it was imperative not to wake my fiancée up and cause her to panic. Slowly, cautiously, and as quietly as I possibly could, I crawled along the air mattress to the metal wall of the truck bed. I slowly peeked my eyes over the edge. I could not believe what I was seeing. There was a person walking slowly around the front of my truck. It was a smaller, slender figure wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up over their head. As they walked, they were quietly mumbling something incoherent to themselves. I quickly slid back down onto the mattress, keeping myself hidden. Fortunately, they had not seen me because they were walking in the opposite direction toward the driver's side door. I sat there in the dark, my heart pounding. I did not know if I should wake my fiancée up or not. I was worried that waking her would cause her to gasp or make a sudden noise, and right now, my main goal was to make as little noise as humanly possible. I thought about just jumping out of the truck bed and tackling the person. They looked a lot smaller than me, and I figured I could easily overpower them. But then the logical part of my brain kicked in. I did not know if they were armed with a weapon, or if there was someone else hiding in the shadows of the woods, waiting to jump me as soon as I made a move. Keeping my new fiancée safe was my #1 priority. I laid there, listening intently to the footsteps outside. I could hear them circling the truck. They made their way around the back bumper and walked right by the foot of the truck bed. I carefully angled my head to try and get a look at the person through the gap in the tailgate. I still could not see their face under the deep hood, but I could tell with certainty that it was a woman. I could see strands of long blonde hair escaping from the bottom of the hood, and as she passed close to the tailgate, I could clearly hear her mumbling. The voice was unmistakably that of a female. I quickly formulated a plan. I decided that the next time she circled back to the front of the truck, I would jump out and confront her. I was somewhat relieved that my fiancée was still asleep through all of this. I waited for several seconds, expecting the footsteps to return to my side of the truck, but she never came back. I leaned over the edge of the truck bed again to look. I did not see her on my side, and I did not see her in front of the truck. That meant she had either fled into the dark woods, or she was standing on the passenger side where I could not see her. As fast and quietly as I could, I pulled out my cell phone, opened the Notes app, and typed out a message in large letters. Don't make a sound. Someone is outside the truck. I'll distract them. Take the keys, start the truck, and I'll jump back into the bed. I gently shook my fiancée to wake her up. I made sure the absolute first thing she saw in the dim light was me holding my finger to my mouth, silently pleading with her not to make a sound. I then held up the bright phone screen for her to read. As quietly as possible, I reached down and slipped the truck keys into her trembling hand. I could see the sheer confusion and terror in her eyes, but thank God, she remained completely silent. I grabbed my pocket knife from my pocket, flipped the blade open, and jumped over the side of the truck bed onto the dirt ground. I planned to scream and scare the intruder away, but when my feet hit the ground, I looked around and nobody was there. The campsite was completely empty. I lowered my guard for just a fraction of a second, feeling confused. My fiancée, seeing me standing there alone, called out from the truck bed, asking me if everything was okay. Just as I was opening my mouth to answer her, an intense, blinding pain shot up my left leg. The woman had been hiding completely flat underneath my truck. While I was standing there, she had swung a thick, heavy tree branch from under the chassis, slamming it directly into my ankle. I lost my balance and stumbled hard to the ground. As I struggled to push myself back up, the woman scrambled out from underneath the truck. She was screaming erratically, a terrifying, unhinged sound. She threw the heavy tree branch directly at my face. I threw my arms up in defense, blocking the wood. That is when she reached into her pocket and pulled out what looked like a long, shiny kitchen knife. She began swinging it wildly and crazily in the air, cutting off my path back to the truck cabin. I kept backing away from her insane, erratic movements, trying to keep her attention on me and away from the truck. Once I felt like we were far enough away from the vehicle, I screamed to my fiancée at the top of my lungs to start the truck. Hearing my shout, my fiancée leaped from the side of the truck bed, scrambled into the driver's seat, and slammed the door shut. Hearing the car door slam, the unhinged woman immediately diverted her attention away from me. She turned and began sprinting directly toward the driver's side door where my fiancée was. But because I had drawn her far enough away, my fiancée had just enough time to turn the key. The engine roared to life. My fiancée put the truck in gear, slammed on the gas, and drove forward a few yards, kicking up a massive cloud of dirt and dust. The woman stopped chasing the truck and began to scream. But this time, it did not sound angry. It sounded like she was crying hysterically. My fiancée drove forward a few feet, then quickly spun the truck around, aiming the bright headlights directly at the woman. She began driving the truck straight toward her to force her away from me. The woman had to dive violently out of the way into the dirt to avoid being hit. As she fell, and her hood slipped off in the bright glare of the high beams, I finally got a clear look at her face. My heart completely stopped. It was my ex-girlfriend. I knew she had some serious mental health problems when we were younger, but the last I had heard from her family, she was doing well and getting treatment. I could not believe my eyes. Our breakup years ago had been incredibly bad. I actually had to get the police involved at one point, because she would constantly stalk around the outside of my house, in the middle of the night, standing under my windows. When she was caught back then, she claimed her only crime was that she was still deeply in love with me. But that was over 6 years ago. It was not a fresh wound. She had somehow tracked me down, got a hold of my travel plans, and followed us across the country. Once her hood was off and she was lying in the dirt, she fell to her knees and just started crying hysterically, clutching the knife. The usual empathetic version of myself would have wanted to go over and make sure she was okay, but not anymore. Not after she tried to stab me. This woman was dangerous, and I was not going to take any more chances with our lives. My fiancée swung the passenger door open as she drove past me. I had more than enough time to run, jump into the moving truck, and slam the door shut. My ex-girlfriend did not even attempt to chase us. She just sat there in the dirt, shrinking in our rearview mirror. As soon as we drove far enough to get cell service, I called the police and reported the entire attack, giving them her full name and description. The most surprising part of the whole thing was that she eventually just went back to her home state a few days later, where the local police were waiting to confront her. To her credit, she did not deny a single thing. She openly told the police that she wanted to be locked up because she knew she was not well. She confessed to the investigators that her actual plan was to murder my fiancé so that we could never be together. When the detectives asked her if she had also planned to harm me, she apparently just broke down and started crying, refusing to answer. The last legal update I ever received about her was that she was committed to a secure psychiatric institution, but I was never told how long her stay was supposed to be. It has been several years now since that horrific night, and thankfully, nothing else has happened. I rarely allow myself to think about that night, but whenever I hear true crime stories or creepy camping tales, I am immediately reminded of that terrible experience. It always makes me wonder if she is still locked away, or if she is out there somewhere, watching us. My wife actually looks up her name on Facebook and other social media platforms all the time to see if she can find any update. But as of right now, she is still completely missing from the internet. And honestly, I hope she remains that way to me for the rest of my life. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments. And remember, we have a whole playlist of true crime episodes ready for you to binge right now. Until next time, see ya.